My brother shoved me down the basement stairs. While I was carrying his birthday cake, my dad told me to walk it off. But the hospital scan exposed years of hidden abuse. My dad told me to walk it off while I lay on the floor. My brother laughed. My mom blamed me until the paramedic called for backup. Then the scan changed everything. The sound my spine made against those basement stairs is something I will never forget for as long as I live. It was not a crack. It was not a pop. It was something deeper than that. Something structural. Like a load-bearing wall giving way inside a building you had trusted your whole life to hold you up. One second, I was carrying a 3-tier birthday cake down a flight of wooden stairs. The next, I was airborne. And then I was not airborne anymore. I hit the concrete floor, and the world went completely silent. Not quiet. Silent. It was the kind of silence that exists below sound, below sensation, below everything you thought you understood about your own body. I blinked at the ceiling. The fluorescent light above me buzzed and flickered. Blue frosting was everywhere. On the floor, on the wall, on my chest. 3 layers of vanilla sponge cake were splattered across my father's basement like a car wreck. I tried to move my legs. Nothing happened. Not pain, not resistance, just nothing. Like asking a question into an empty room and hearing only the echo of your own voice come back. I would like to tell you that what happened next was shock and confusion. That maybe I misread the room. That maybe my family panicked in that specific way. People panic when they love someone and do not know what to do. But that is not what happened. What happened was my brother Jake appeared at the bottom of the stairs, looked down at me, and said, his voice dripping with practiced theatrical concern, "Dad, he fell. I think he did it on purpose." And upstairs, my father's voice, tired and clipped and utterly unsurprised, called back down, "Walk it off, Marcus. Stop making a scene. I want you to hold that for a second. Walk it off. I want you to understand that I lay on that concrete floor, unable to feel anything below my waist, staring at a flickering light, covered in cake. And those were the first words my father said to me. Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "Don't move." Not, "We're calling someone." Not even silence. Walk it off. I had been walking things off my entire life. 31 years of it. I just did not know, until that Saturday afternoon in April, that this time there would be nothing left to walk off, and that the truth, the whole ugly mountain of it, was about to come down. I need to back up, because none of this makes sense without context. And context is the one thing my family has always been very careful to control. My name is Marcus Hale. I am 31 years old. I am a high school history teacher in Raleigh, North Carolina. I drive a 2019 Subaru Outback. I have a rescue beagle named Churchill. And up until about 8 months ago, I genuinely believed that the way I grew up was just normal. Difficult? Sure. Unusual? Maybe. But normal in the specific way dysfunction feels normal when it is the only reality you have ever known. I grew up in Greensboro. My father, Dennis Hale, was a regional sales director for a construction supply company. The kind of man who filled a room with his presence and made you feel, somehow, like you were permanently shrinking inside it. My mother, Patricia, taught Sunday school and made casseroles, and smiled with the kind of practiced brightness people develop when they need the world to see one specific version of themselves at all times. And then there was Jake. Jake Hale, 4 years younger than me, 6'2", sandy blonde, the effortless kind of handsome that gets you voted homecoming king without really trying. Star quarterback from sophomore year on, AP classes, honor roll, the kind of son you frame photos of and brag about at dinner parties, while the other kid, the older one, the quiet one, the one who reads too much and does not play sports, sits next to you like a prop. I was that prop. I do not say this with bitterness, at least not anymore. I say it with the clinical detachment of someone who has spent a significant number of therapy sessions unpacking exactly what it means to be the invisible child in a family where love is rationed like a resource and distributed strictly. Based on performance. Jake performed. I existed. And for years, for decades, I told myself it was just the natural order of things. Birth order dynamics, personality differences, the way some kids are just sunnier, more charismatic, more deserving of the spotlight. I told myself Jake's cruelties were accidents, that the wrist fracture I sustained at 14 when he accidentally bent my arm behind my back during what my parents later described as roughhousing was just brothers being brothers, that the concussion I got at 12 when I tumbled off the front porch during a game Jake had invented specifically to isolate me near the edge was my own fault for not paying attention, that the shoulder I dislocated at 16 after Jake shoved me into a locker at school was the result of me walking into it. I told myself these things because my parents told me these things. And when you are young And the people who are supposed to protect you hand you a narrative, you take it. You hold it close. Because the alternative, believing that your family sees you as less than, that your pain is an inconvenience, that the person sleeping 20 feet down the hall from you has been systematically and deliberately hurting you for years, is something the human mind will do almost anything to avoid. So I carried the story they gave me all the way to 31 years old. All the way to that birthday party. My grandmother called me the night before. Grandma Elaine, my father's mother, 74 years old, the only person in my family who had ever looked at me like I was worth looking at. Her voice was shaking on the phone. Please come, Marcus. Family should be together. Jake's turning 27. Your father will be there. I sat on my couch with Churchill in my lap and stared at my ceiling for a long time after she said that. I almost did not go. I want to be very clear about that. Something in my gut, that same instinct I had spent 31 years being taught to ignore, said, do not go. Make an excuse. Send a card. Stay home with your dog and your sanity. I had driven to Greensboro for Christmas the previous year and come home in the specific kind of exhausted that sleep does not fix. I had promised myself I was done performing normalcy for a family that had never extended me the same courtesy. But Grandma Elaine asked, and I still had not fully learned, in those days, how to say no to the people I loved. So, I baked a cake, 3 tiers, blue frosting, Jake's favorite color since childhood. I spent 4 hours on it because that is who I am. Someone who, even when he knows better, still tries, still shows up, still brings the cake. I arrived at 2:15 p.m. on a Saturday. My father answered the door, looked at the cake, said, it's leaning, and walked back into the house. My mother hugged me with the precise warmth of someone fulfilling a social obligation and immediately asked if I had lost weight in a tone that made it sound like a problem. Jake shook my hand in this elaborate performative bro shake and said, Big bro showed up. Look at that. He smiled at me in the way he always did, all charm and teeth. And I noticed that his eyes did not move when he smiled. They never did. I had just never let myself notice before. The party was 12 people. Family friends, a couple of Jake's college buddies, and Grandma Elaine sitting in the corner with her hands folded in her lap, watching the room with the specific alertness of someone who knows exactly what she is watching. Around 4 p.m., my mother decided the cake needed to go downstairs to the basement, where they had set up the party table. The kitchen was too crowded. Marcus will take it, she said. Not asked. Said. I should have put the cake on the counter and walked out the front door. Instead, I picked it up. I was 3 steps from the top of the basement stairs when I heard him behind me. I do not know how to explain the way the air changes when Jake is about to do something. There is a particular stillness to it, the kind that comes right before something breaks. I had felt it a dozen times before, always a half-second too late. Need help, big bro? His voice was soft, almost gentle. Something cold moved through me, something old and animal. I've got it, I said. I kept walking. Oops, one word. That was all it was. And then, his hands hit my back with the force of someone who had been planning this. And I know he had been planning this. Then I was gone. The cake went first. Then my feet left the stair. Then there was nothing but air, and the specific terror of a fall that, in the half-second before impact, is going to be bad. I hit every stair on the way down. I counted them later from the hospital bed. 9 stairs. My lower back announced each one. Then the concrete floor. Then the silence. Then, nothing where my legs used to be. I was lying there for what felt like an hour, but was probably 90 seconds, before Jake appeared at the bottom of the stairs. He looked at me with an expression I now know was completely manufactured. Eyebrows up, mouth open. The pantomime of shock. Dad? He called upstairs, already walking away from me. He fell. I think he did it on purpose. My father's voice came from above. Walk it off, Marcus. My mother appeared at the top of the stairs, looked down at me, and then looked at the cake. Marcus, she said, and her voice was tight with something I recognized after all these years as genuine emotion, just not the kind I needed. How could you ruin his special day like this? I tried to speak. What came out was a sound I had never made before in my life, and hope I never make again, something broken and low. It was Grandma Elaine who called 911. I did not know that until later. She had watched Jake come down the stairs ahead of me. She had seen his hands. She made the call from the kitchen before my father could stop her, and when the paramedics arrived 8 minutes later, she was the one who let them in. The paramedic's name was Tara Okonkwo. I know her full name now because she testified. I know her certification number and her years of service. and I know that she is one of the 3 people on this earth I will be grateful to for the rest of my life, however long or limited that ends up being. Tara came down those basement stairs, took one look at me, and put her hand on my shoulder. "Hey," she said. "I'm here. Don't move. Talk to me. What's your name?" "Marcus," I said. My voice was someone else's voice. She ran her fingernail firmly across the bottom of my right foot. I watched it happen. I felt nothing. She did the left foot. Same result. Then she stood up and turned to face my father, who had come halfway down the stairs, his 6-foot frame filling the doorway, his jaw set with the particular expression he reserved for situations where he felt his authority was being questioned. She dialed. "Possible spinal injury," she said into the phone, holding my father's gaze without blinking. "Requesting police presence. Code 4. My father turned the specific shade of red that meant he was about to raise his voice. "This is a family matter," he said. "Sir," Tara said, without looking away from him. Then she knelt back down beside me and kept talking into the phone. "Step back." He did not step back immediately, but he also did not come any closer. As they got the backboard under me and started moving me toward the stretcher, Tara leaned close enough that only I could hear her. "Squeeze my hand," she said quietly, "if you're afraid in this house." I held her hand so hard, I am surprised I did not break her fingers. Greensboro Medical Center, 5:42 p.m. The ER attending was Dr. Raymond Osei, a compact man in his mid-40s with reading glasses that he wore pushed up on his forehead and an expression of careful, professional neutrality that I would come to deeply appreciate in the hours that followed. The CT scan took 11 minutes. The results came back in 40. L1 compression fracture, significant spinal cord compromise, possible permanent neurological damage. I would need surgery within 48 hours, and there was, at that moment, no guarantee about what I would or would not get back. I processed this information lying flat on a hospital gurney, staring at another fluorescent light, listening to Dr. Osei explain it in the measured, precise way good doctors explain devastating things. With honesty, with care, without softening it into something it is not. But that was not the thing that changed everything. Dr. Osei came back 20 minutes after the scan with a different expression on his face. He pulled a chair close to my bedside and sat down in it, and something about the way he sat, forward, elbows on his knees, glasses off, told me this was going to be a different conversation. "Marcus," he said, "I need to ask you some questions, and I need you to know that whatever you tell me stays in this room unless you decide otherwise. Okay?" I looked at him. "Okay. The L1 fracture is new," he said. "It happened today." He paused. "But the scan is also showing us older injuries. Healed fractures in 2 ribs, right side, mid-thoracic. An improperly healed fracture in the left wrist. Evidence of an old shoulder dislocation, right side, that was never surgically corrected. There is also imaging consistent with a significant head injury, likely several years ago, that was never followed up on." He looked at me directly. "The cumulative pattern of these injuries is what we call, in clinical terms, non-accidental trauma." The room was very quiet. "Non-accidental," I said. "It means the injuries are consistent with repeated, deliberate physical trauma over a period of years. The distribution, the type of fractures, the lack of proper medical follow-up. Marcus, someone has been hurting you." For a long time, I closed my eyes, and the thing I had been carrying, the carefully arranged tower of excuses and rationalizations, and walk it off, and stop making a scene, and Jake did not mean it, did not fall slowly. It just was not there anymore. Detective Adrienne Sanders arrived at the hospital at 8:15 p.m. She was 52 years old, 24 years on the Greensboro PD, the last 9 in crimes against persons. She wore no-nonsense flats and a blazer the color of charcoal, and she sat down next to my bed with a yellow legal pad and said, "Take as long as you need. We're not going anywhere." I talked for 3 hours. I told her about the wrist. 14 years old, Jake bending my arm behind my back in the driveway until something gave way, my mother telling the ER doctor I had fallen off my bike. I told her about the concussion at 12, the porch, the game Jake had created, the specific angle of the push that sent me off the edge and onto the walkway below. I told her about the shoulder at 16, the locker, the way Jake had apologized so smoothly afterward that I believed him for approximately 6 hours before deciding it did not matter, because nothing was ever going to happen about it anyway. I told her about the small cruelties that do not leave physical marks, the years of being talked over, diminished, mocked in ways carefully calibrated to sound like teasing. The college application my father had accidentally failed to mail. The job reference he had given that I found out later from a former employer, had described me as inconsistent and unreliable. I told her about the family mythology, maintained with almost corporate efficiency, that positioned Jake as exceptional and me as a cautionary tale about what happened when you did not try hard enough. Detective Sanders wrote everything down, every date I could remember, every name, every specific detail. When I finished, her pen stopped. "Is there anything else?" she said. "That you haven't told me yet? Anything you dismissed as too small? Or as something nobody would believe?" I thought for a long moment. "He pushed me today on purpose," I said. I heard him say oops right before his hands hit my back. He had positioned himself behind me. He waited until I was on the stairs with the cake. Sanders nodded slowly. "We're going to need that looked at very carefully." What I did not know, lying in that hospital bed, was that Detective Sanders had already spoken to Tara Okonkwo. Tara had documented her own observations at the scene. Jake's body language, his position relative to the bottom of the stairs, the direction the cake had traveled, the placement of my body on the floor. All of it recorded with the precision of someone who had seen, in her years of work, exactly what this kind of scene looks like. And I did not know that the investigation was about to take a turn I could not have scripted. 3 days after the fall, I was still in the hospital waiting for surgery when Detective Sanders came back. She had someone with her. He was around Jake's age, mid to late 20s, nervous energy, wearing a Temple University hoodie and keeping his hands in his pockets. He introduced himself as Austin Mercer. He said he had been Jake's friend in college, or at least something close to it. "I saw the news report," Austin said, standing near the door like someone who had not fully decided whether he was staying. "About the investigation. And I have something." He pulled out his phone. On the screen was a video. Jake's face. Jake's voice. Sitting in what looked like a dorm room or an apartment, laughing, speaking with the easy confidence of someone who had never in his life considered the possibility of consequences. "Yeah, I taught him a lesson at Christmas," Jake said on the screen. "Guy thinks he can just show up and play the victim? I own that house too." Someone off camera laughed. "How bad was it?" the voice asked. And Jake leaned forward with the specific light of someone recounting something that pleased him. In precise, laughing detail, he explained how he had planned the accident 3 Christmases ago that re-injured my shoulder, how he had positioned himself, what he had told my parents afterward, how my father had immediately accepted his version of events. "It's almost too easy," Jake said. "He's just there. Every time." Austin had sent the video to himself 2 years earlier because, he said, something about it had made him feel sick in a way he could not fully explain at the time. He had saved it and had not known what to do with it. He said he told himself it was just talk, that everyone exaggerated. Then he saw the news report. "I couldn't not," he said, still near the door. "I'm sorry it took me this long." Detective Sanders bagged the phone as evidence, documented the chain of custody on the spot, and looked at me with the steady expression of someone who has been doing this long enough to know when a case has just broken open. That video, preserved on Austin Mercer's Samsung Galaxy S22 for 2 years, became Exhibit D. Surgery was on Wednesday. Dr. Priya Kamath, Chief of Neurosurgery at Greensboro Medical, 30 years of practice, fellowship, trained at Johns Hopkins, performed a 4-hour decompression and stabilization procedure. When I came out of anesthesia, she was there. "The surgery went well," she said, and I watched her face for what she was not saying. "The next 72 hours are critical for neural recovery. We'll know more as the swelling goes down." I had feeling in my right leg within 36 hours. My left leg took 11 days. It was not the clean, cinematic recovery you see in movies. It was grinding, brutal, agonizing work. Physical therapy started before I could fully feel the floor. I had to learn to trust a body that had just spent 11 days refusing to communicate. There were mornings I could not get out of bed, afternoons where I made it to the parallel bars and back, and considered that a significant victory. Nights I do not want to write about, but I moved, slowly. With a walker, then with a cane, then, 3 months later, in a physical therapy gym in Raleigh, on my own. For the record, my parents did not visit me in the hospital. My father sent a text that said, "Hope you feel better. Call when you're out." My mother left a voicemail about Jake being very upset about how things had escalated. Grandma Elaine sat in the chair next to my bed for 4 days straight. She brought me chocolate pudding from the cafeteria. She held my hand when the nights were bad. She never once asked me to minimize what had happened or protect anyone's feelings about it. And when Detective Sanders called to ask if she would be willing to speak, Grandma Elaine said yes without hesitation. The grand jury convened 6 weeks after the fall. Monica Tran, Assistant District Attorney, 12 years of prosecutorial experience, with a specialty in family violence cases, presented the evidence in the precise, unhurried way of someone who knows the story, tells itself when you just get out of its way. The old medical records. The scan results. Dr. Osei's testimony establishing the pattern of non-accidental trauma. Tara Okonkwo's documentation from the scene. Austin Mercer's video, time-stamped and authenticated. Jake was indicted on 4 counts. Aggravated assault causing serious bodily injury. 2 counts of simple assault for prior incidents, with sufficient documentation. And 1 count of filing a false police report for the statement he had given officers at the scene, blaming me for my own fall. The trial lasted 3 days. My school counselor from Greensboro High, a man named Mr. Theodore Birch, 22 years of student advocacy, the kind of educator who writes things down because he understands that documentation is protection, testified about a series of incidents involving Jake that had been flagged when Jake was 16. Reports of threatening behavior towards smaller students. A psychological evaluation that the school had recommended and my father had refused to permit. Mr. Birch had kept every note, every record, every email in a folder for 15 years because he had a feeling, he said, that they might eventually matter. They mattered. Dr. Eleanor Voss, a clinical forensic psychologist retained by the prosecution, testified for an hour and 40 minutes about the documented pattern of behavior, the hallmarks of predatory sibling abuse, and the specific psychology of an abuser operating within a family system that consistently enabled him. She used phrases like calculated minimization, pattern of coercive control, and family system complicity. I watched the jury's faces as she spoke. I watched them moving through the same sequence I had moved through. Disbelief. Then recognition. Then the particular kind of quiet anger that settles in when you understand that something has been happening in plain sight for a very long time. Grandma Elaine took the stand on the second day of trial. She was 74 years old, 5 feet tall, dressed in her church clothes. She spoke for 45 minutes without notes, in the steady, clear voice of someone who had been waiting a long time to say true things out loud. She talked about the things she had seen at family gatherings over 30 years and told herself were normal. The way Dennis and Patricia responded to Marcus versus the way they responded to Jake. She talked about the fall she had witnessed at a barbecue when Jake was 19 and Marcus was 23, an accident that left Marcus limping for a week, which she had mentioned to Dennis afterward and been told, flatly, to mind her business. She talked about the birthday party, what she had seen at the top of the stairs before I started down. Where Jake's hands were, she cried once, briefly. Then she composed herself and kept going. The defense attorney, a man named Gerald Firth, Yale Law, custom suit, the kind of lawyer you retain when you have money and a story to protect, did his best. He called it roughhousing. He called it family dynamics. He introduced character witnesses who talked about Jake's charitable work, his community service, and his volunteer coaching at a youth football camp. None of it landed. Jake took the stand on the final day. He was composed when he started, suit pressed, hair combed, the golden boy in full effect. He described the fall as an accident, said he had been right behind me trying to help, said the whole prosecution was a mischaracterization of a tragic event by a brother who had always, in his words, played the victim for attention. Monica Tran let him finish. Then she played the video. The courtroom got very quiet. Jake on the screen, laughing, describing my injuries like highlight reels from a game he had won. The exact planning, the satisfaction in his voice. Monica paused the video. "Mr. Hale," she said, "is that you on this recording?" Jake's composure lasted approximately 4 more seconds. It was talk, he said. Everyone exaggerates. This whole thing is just his biggest manipulation yet. That's what he does. He manipulates people. Jury members physically leaned back from him. I watched it happen. 12 people, in real time, making a decision. The 4-woman read the verdict on a Tuesday morning. Guilty. All counts. My father went the color of old paper. Jake's lawyer touched his arm. Jake himself sat very still. Then he looked across the courtroom at me, at my cane, at my face, and I watched something pass through his expression that I had never seen there before in 31 years of looking at him. Fear. Not the manufactured, performative concern he had shown at the bottom of those stairs. Real fear. The kind that lives under the charm and the calculus and the careful architecture of someone who has never, until this moment, believed in consequences for himself. I looked back at him. I did not say anything. I smiled. Jake received 5 years, with a mandatory minimum of 3 before parole eligibility at Polk Correctional Institution. The judge, the Honorable Marie Delacroix, described the case in her sentencing remarks as A profound and long-documented failure of the most fundamental duty any human being holds, to protect, rather than prey upon those who should be safest in their care. My father and mother were investigated separately for child welfare violations related to the pattern of documented injuries. The DA ultimately declined to prosecute them directly, citing insufficient evidence of active participation as opposed to willful blindness. But that determination was made a matter of public record, which I consider its own kind of accountability. Their names are in that record. What they chose not to see is in that record. They separated 6 months after the trial. My father moved to a condo in Charlotte. My mother has, by all accounts, begun attending a new church in a town where nobody knows her yet. I have not spoken to either of them since the hospital. I probably will not. It has been 8 months since the birthday party. I walk without a cane now most days, though my lower back reminds me every morning that it has opinions about cold weather and long drives and the specific angle of certain chairs. Dr. Kamath says the neurological recovery is, in her words, as good as we could have hoped for, which is the kind of phrasing that invites you to sit with both gratitude and grief simultaneously. I am still in Raleigh, still teaching history. There is something that feels deliberate about teaching people, specifically, how to understand what happened in the past so it does not govern the future. My students do not know any of this. They know me as the teacher who is maybe a little too invested in the idea that ordinary people can change the course of events by deciding to tell the truth. I have a therapist named Dr. Joanna Weld, who is patient and excellent, and who has helped me understand that what happened to me was not the result of some deficiency in me, not some fundamental unworthiness that made me the easier target, the invisible child, the one who could be hurt and not seen. It took time to accept that. Grief is weird and non-linear, and it does not care about your timeline. Grandma Elaine comes to Raleigh twice a year now. She sits on my porch and drinks sweet tea and talks about everything and nothing, and Churchill loves her unreservedly, which is the best character reference I know. She told me once, sitting out there on a warm evening, that she had known for years something was wrong, that she had told herself it was not her place, that she regretted it every day. I told her she was there when it counted. She squeezed my hand and did not say anything for a while. The thing about being the invisible kid is that you spend a long time believing invisibility is your natural state, that you are just built that way, smaller, quieter, less. That the people around you have accurately assessed your worth and found it wanting, and the appropriate response is to recalibrate your expectations downward until they fit the space you have been given. Jake did not push me down those stairs because I was nothing. He pushed me because he had spent his entire life being told that I did not matter, and he believed it, and he acted on it, and he did it in front of our family and expected, as he always had, that the story would go his way. He was wrong. Some people, in hurting you, teach you something about yourself that you could not have learned any other way. They show you exactly where your limits are, exactly what you are willing to carry, and what you are finally ready to put down. Jake spent 27 years teaching me that I was not worth protecting. Lying on that basement floor, covered in birthday cake, unable to feel my legs, listening to my father tell me to walk it off, I decided he was wrong. I decided that for the first time, and everything after that, was just the work of proving it.